What's going on, guys? It's your boy Spudzie here, and today I tested out every single new build that you can play in PvP on the Revenant. In Secrets of the Obscure, we got the new Weaponmaster update, which allows us to run any elite spec weapon on any spec that we want, as long as it is within the class. That means that you can run great sword and short bow on every spec of Revenant. There is offhand shield as well, but I will not be covering that in this video because this video is all about new builds that I created and discovered, and offhand shield unfortunately just doesn't fit into that category. So, as mentioned before, the main topic of this video, we'll be going over the viability and how good these new weapons are on these other specs. I will be covering the greatsword and the short bow on every spec of Revenant, so stay tuned if you want to see how well they stack up against each other and what new combinations are actually performing better than the old ones. I will not be going over any of the builds in depth, just taking a glance at them and explaining how they function when compared to how they used to function on their primary spec. With that being said, however, I am open to making some build videos on the builds I created, so if you would like that, go ahead and drop a like. Let me know down below in the comment if you want to see some of these new builds featured on the channel. Starting us off will be the Greatsword on Herald. I think that the Greatsword on Herald actually is a pretty good build. It has fantastic utility through glint stance. It can survive better. It has access to more offensive boons than Vindicator does. It is just honestly, it's like a Vindicator except a bit more offensive, which is what I feel like sometimes you need on Vindicator. It's got great burst. Greatsword is an excellent option if you need some more consistent damage on Herald, because I know in the past Herald's always been more bursty and, you know, dual swords sometimes can't get the job done and you just wish that they had some extra set to do a little bit more damage. I think Greatsword is going to be perfect for you. It fits in the spec really well and actually makes up for a lot of the inconsistencies in Herald's damage and survivability. I think that Greatsword overall is just a really good option for the Herald. Moving on is the Condi Shortbow Herald. I don't particularly enjoy this build as much as I thought I would. I feel like whenever it comes to, I feel like on paper it's something that sounds really good, but once you actually start getting into these 1v1s and these outnumbered fights, it starts to really fall off. For starters, you have to be in melee-ish range to make Invoke Torment work, and if you're not running Invoke Torment, you don't really do enough damage because you don't have any of the traits in the Renegade trait line. All you have are Herald traits, which don't really add any damage into your kit that the short bow would like. If you're too close in range to make Invoke Torment work, you don't survive as much because all you really have is glint stance and you're using like a Condi bow, and honestly, while glint stance can help you survive a bit through the heals and regen, it's just not enough for Condis to get their work done. But I will say that the move speed you can get from a trait line in the Herald tree that increases your movement speed per ticks of upkeep actually works pretty well and will help you out on your kiting and everything. That is actually one of the positives of this build. Overall, I think that the Condi Shortbow Herald is a fun build, but if you're trying to play as optimal as possible, I would just stick to the Renegade for now. Moving on to our last Herald build will be the Power Shortbow Herald. I think this build has some great burst, and it actually is a pretty solid build. It has way better utility through glint stance, whereas all you have on Renegade is Shiro and Jalis. So I will say I think that the Power Shortbow Herald is better than Renegade in 1v1, but I will say that it does fall off in Outnumbered due to not having access to the Heart Piercer trait in the Renegade trait line. Moving on to Renegade, there's only one build that I would actually see myself playing, and that is the Greatsword. I think if you're running a crit and ferocity build like Marauders and Dragon's Gear, that the damage on this build's actually kind of crazy. Callous Fervor is a great modifier. I think that the consistency of the Greatsword and Callous Fervor really go hand in hand and make this build super solid. While it does have great burst, it actually lacks a lot in the survival area because you don't have glint stance or alliance stance. It just really, it excels at dealing damage, and that's about it. On top of this, the Renegade trait line doesn't really have any desirable traits that I would see myself wanting to run with the Greatsword. The only reason you would run this is just for crazy damage through the crits and the Callous Fervor modifiers if you really enjoy that kind of play style. In my opinion, if you want to run a Greatsword, you're better off doing it on Herald because of glint stance and just how great it is and how good Greatsword goes with the Herald. Last up is the Vindicator, starting off on the Condi short bow. So I actually made a Condi build on my Vindicator that uses a short bow and a staff. I think this build is actually really strong and really fun. This setup actually has amazing stat coverage and really diverse builds. You could run like a mixture of different gears and you will most likely be good. Any mixture of expertise, Condi damage, toughness, and vitality, and concentration are all some really great stats that you can just throw on. Survivability on this build is fantastic due to the Vindicator dodge and traits, as well as the alliance stance. You're able to run salvation, corruption, and the Vindicator trait line to kind of like cover all your bases. Like, this build actually is super strong. It can cover so many bases. On my build that I made, I can get barrier, cleansing, Condi damage, boon rip, healing, boon duration, Condi extension. Like, you can do so much on this build. Like, this actually is the most versatile build that I have played in a very long time. And the corruption trait line actually works really well on this because unlike the Herald, where you can't really get in close or else you're gonna die if you try to do all these invoke torment plays, it's a little different on the Vindicator because you actually have more traits that work well in your builds that will let you survive longer and be in melee range for a lot longer than you can on the Herald. An alliance stance just allows you to dodge in and out of melee range to get your invoke torment. It's just honestly a really great package. Definitely try to play this build if you can because it is super strong and a lot of fun. I never thought I would see a Condi build on Vindicator before. On terms of the power short bow on Vindicator, I would not recommend it, honestly. You're better off just playing on the Renegade or maybe Herald. It's just not as good as the Renegade short bow for power. You just don't have any good options for power damage that the short bow would like. Like, Heart Piercer is really nice in outnumbered fights. And the fact that you don't have Callous Fervor, I mean, you do have some multipliers on the Vindicator, like Death Drop and Leviathan Strength, but honestly, it kind of just works against the power short bow because reality, what you want to be doing on the power build is bursting down target, short bow 5 into 7 shot, and short bow 2, that's really what you want to do. And the Vindicator trait line, I mean, I guess if you want to stack up the modifiers and go for some crazy one-shot build, that could work. But overall, you don't really need sustain on this kind of build. And I just didn't find as much success with it as I did on the Condi variation. If you want to play on the power short bow, definitely go for a Renegade build. So, in conclusion, if you want to play with a Greatsword, you should definitely try it out on the Herald, as I think that weapon goes really well in that spec. Obviously, it still works really well on the Vindicator, but if you want a brand new experience and one that actually might work better on your playstyle, definitely check out the Greatsword Herald. If you want something that is surprisingly very good and actually has a potential to be a really good build, try out the Condi short bow on the Vindicator. You have so many tools at your disposal and just so much damage. Like, this build is so good. Really try it out if you want to play with a Condi short bow build. You can still play it on Herald, but I wouldn't recommend it as much as Vindicator. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.